So get here. Welcome to my channel. Today we are talking about solving equations. This video is part of 3 other videos. I decided to break up solving equations into 3 different parts just because there's so much to cover in this section. But you are welcome to watch all 3 videos. The first video, we're going to be focusing on just solving 1 and 2-step equations. And then in video 2 and 3, we will progress upon these topics. Before we can start solving equations, we have to talk about inverse operations. So we're going to be using inverse operations to solve equations. Inverse operations just means operations that undo each other. Addition and subtraction are both inverse operations. Multiplication and division are both inverse operations as well. For example, 3 plus 2 equals 5. So that means I can subtract 3 from 5 and get 2. 2 times 3 equals 6. So that means the inverse would be to divide. 6 divided by 3 is 2, or 6 divided by 2 is 3. We're going to be using inverse operations whenever we are solving equations, so it's important that you understand this. We're going to start with solving one-step equations, and we're going to start with these 2 basic equations that only require 1 step to solve. So in both of these, I need to solve for x. That means I need to get x by itself, and I'm going to use inverse operations to do so. So let's look at the first one, 2x equals 14. In order to solve this, I need to divide both sides by 2. And the reason I'm dividing by 2 is because to get x by itself, I need to get a 1x, and 2 divided by 2 is 1x. Now, I don't really need to write 1x. I'm just going to write x because it's understood to be 1. So I get x equals 14 divided by 2 is 7, and that is it. X equals 7. And I can always check to see if this is right, because if I multiply 2 times 7, I get 14. So this works. It's a true solution. Let's look at the second example. On this one, I have a fraction. Not to worry, you can still work this out. This is negative 8 equals x over 6. Now, the x over 6 is technically 1x over 6, so the fraction here is 1x over 6, but I can rewrite this, so if it helps you to visually see it this way, you can rewrite it as negative 8 equals 1 over 6 times x, because that's what's happening here is the fraction is multiplying by x. Now, in order to get rid of this fraction, I'm going to have to multiply by what's called the reciprocal. The reciprocal of a fraction is the fraction flipped. So the denominator and numerator of that fraction are flipped. So for example, if my fraction was 3 over 2, the reciprocal of 3 over 2 is 2 over 3. You just flip the fraction. So in order to get x by itself, I'm going to have to multiply both sides of my equation by the reciprocal, which is 6 over 1 in this case. Now, whenever I multiply by 6 over 1, on the right, 1 times 6 is 6, and 6 times 1 is 6. So I get that 1x that I was looking for. This just becomes 1x. But then again, I don't need to really write 1x. I'm just going to put an x. And then negative 8 times 6 is negative 48. And that is it. X equals negative 48. Again, I can check this and plug it in for x. If I plug it in for x, I get negative 48 divided by 6, which is true because that's equal to negative 8. So I know that my solution is correct. You don't always have to check, but sometimes it helps to check. We're going to look at some one-step equations that require you to either add or subtract using inverse operations. So the first example is x plus 14 equals 23. In order to get x by itself, this time I'm going to have to work with the positive 14. And I'm going to use inverse operations, and I'm going to subtract 14 from both sides. Now, the reason I'm subtracting 14 is because I want 14 to go away on the left. Well, 14 minus 14 is 0. So that means the 14s here cancel each other out. And all I have left is x on the left side. So I could just bring down the x. And then on the right side, 23 minus 14, that gives me 9. So my answer is x equals 9. Same thing on the second example, except this time we have 12 equals x minus 10. So to get x by itself, I'm going to have to add 10 to both sides so that I can get a 0 pair here on the right. Negative 10 plus 10 is 0. So those cancel each other out. I can bring down the x. 12 plus 10 gives me 22. So x equals 22. We're going to look at two-step equations. These equations require 2 steps to solve. So let's look at the first one. 3x plus 11 equals 8. So we're going to use a combination of addition and subtraction or multiplication and division. So we're using both inverse operations. So I need to get x by itself, and I'm going to start with the 11 first. Okay, I need to work with 11, I need to work with 3, but I'm going to start with the 11 first. And in order to get 11 out of the way, I have to use the inverse of addition and subtract 11 from both sides. Whenever I do that, 11 minus 11 is 0, so I can bring down the 3x. And then 8 minus 11 is negative 3. Then I can use the inverse of multiplication and divide both sides by 3, so x equals negative 1. Same thing on this other problem. First thing I need to do on this second problem, 4 equals 2 plus 2x. I need to subtract 2 from both sides first. 2 minus 2 is 0, so they cancel here. 4 minus 2 is 2, so 2 equals 2x. Divide both sides by 2, I get 1 equals x. Through these last 2 problems on here. So the first one, I'm going to add 5 to both sides first. And that's to cancel out the negative 5, because negative 5 plus 5 is 0. I can bring down the 2x. 11 plus 5 gives me 16. Divide by 2 on both sides. X equals 8. The one on the right has a fraction involved in it, but you can do it. So first things first, we need to add 7 to both sides so that we can get rid of that negative 7. Whenever I do that, negative 7 plus 7 is 0, so those cancel each other out. And then I can bring down the x divided by 2, and 9 plus 7 is 16. Now I need to cancel out the 1 over 2, or at least just get a 1x on the left. And in order to get 1, I need to multiply by the reciprocal. The reciprocal of 1 over 2 is 2 over 1. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 2 over 1. Whenever I do that on the left, I get just 1x. And then on the right, 16 times 2 is 32. And that is it for these 2 problems. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. Make sure you subscribe to my channel if you want to keep up with any new videos that I post. Part 2 and 3 of this video will cover the rest of solving equations.